He spent 25 years behind bars for a crime he didn't commit. DNA finally cleared him, but when the real killer confessed, the system still refused to set him free. This is the shocking true story of one man's fight against injustice, corruption, and a broken legal system. He was just 19, a college freshman with his whole life ahead of him. Xavier Miles, full-ride scholarship, a new dorm, new books, and a mother who cried in the parking lot because her baby made it out. She had prayed for this moment for years, a chance to rewrite the story that had been written for so many boys before him, a chance for Xavier to rise. But then came the knock on the door. 5 detectives, 1 neighbor's whisper, and a crime that left a city bleeding. A girl was found, bruised, beaten, dumped behind a liquor store just 3 blocks from campus. No name that night, just a body, and all they needed was someone to blame. Xavier had no alibi, just a black face in the wrong zip code, a hoodie caught on surveillance, the flicker of a stammer under harsh fluorescent lights. They called it a confession, but to him, it sounded like a young man begging to go home. 14 hours, no lawyer, no water, no mother. The jury took 2 hours. The judge never looked him in the eye. When they said guilty, his hands were already cuffed, his future already gone. His mother collapsed in the back row. His father never showed. They gave him 1 box of clothes when he entered prison, and a name no one would say out loud. Over 25 years, Xavier learned to disappear, to fold his pain into paper, to stop counting the holidays he missed, to erase the sound of his sister's voice, growing distant, then silent. He lost his 20s, his 30s, his will. Until year 24. A letter came, smuggled through laundry lines. No return address, just 1 sentence. I was the one who killed her. Xavier thought it was a joke, another cruel game from a place that loved breaking men, until his new public defender found something else. A missing police report, a buried witness, fingerprints on a belt never tested. The case that closed in 1999 was cracking open in 2025. The man they threw away was standing at the edge of something almost too dangerous to hope for. But freedom has a cost. Because when they went to find the man who wrote the letter, he wasn't in prison anymore. He was somewhere else, somewhere no one expected. And he wasn't hiding, he was smiling. They expected to find him locked up. Instead, he was a free man. No ankle monitor, no parole, no restrictions, just a clean suit, a big smile, and a new name. 25 years after the murder, the man who confessed was living 2 towns over, selling used cars, raising 2 sons, attending church on Sundays. He hadn't been hiding. He'd been erased. His prints had been found on the belt used in strangulation. But the lab technician marked it inconclusive. The detective called it irrelevant. The prosecutor never mentioned it in court. Because the case was closed. And reopening it meant admitting a mistake. Admitting a life stolen. Admitting that a 19-year-old was buried alive for a crime he didn't commit. The public defender pushed for a new hearing, but the DA's office dragged its feet. 3 weeks of silence, then threats, then a phone call. The man who confessed, Darnell Briggs, wanted to meet. Face to face, privately. No press, no lawyers. He said he had something to say, but only to the man he replaced. 25 years ago, their paths crossed for 2 minutes outside a campus party. Now they sat across from each other in a prison visitation room, one wearing a jumpsuit, the other wearing a gold cross and guilt he couldn't carry anymore. And then Darnell said 4 words that broke the room in half. "They told me to." He said it wasn't supposed to go that far. He said she wasn't the target. He said it was a setup. He said the cops knew. He said he had names. But before the lawyer could record it, before he could get a signature, before anything official was said, Darnell stood up, left the room, and vanished. No address, no phone, no cooperation, and 1 week later, he was dead. Ruled an overdose, but his family said he'd been sober for 8 years. Clean job, regular life. No drugs found in his home. No track marks on his body, just silence, and the case suddenly closed again. But something didn't sit right. Not with the lawyer. Not with the sister who never stopped believing. And not with Xavier, who just got his first taste of hope in a quarter century. Because someone wanted this buried. And if Darnell was telling the truth, then the killer wasn't just one man. It was the whole machine. They buried Darnell fast. No autopsy report released. No toxicology made public. Just a quick press release. And a quieter silence. But one thing didn't sit right. His confession hadn't come from guilt. It came from fear. The man who'd lived free for 25 years suddenly wanted to talk. And days later, he was gone. The public defender filed for emergency hearings, but the state said it was all coincidence. A junkie's rambling, a dead man's regret. And Xavier? He was still behind bars, watching time slip through steel bars and cement cracks, still waiting for a name to be cleared, still waiting for someone to believe. His sister showed up one day with a box, old photos, letters, and something new. A photocopy of a police file, stamped internal use only. Inside, Detective Paul Whitaker. The same detective who arrested Xavier, who testified that he looked nervous, who said he saw evil in his eyes. The file said Whitaker had been under investigation in 2003. Bribery, evidence tampering, witness intimidation, and then transferred quietly to a small town hours away. The case? Closed due to lack of cooperation. But that wasn't all. One line in the file changed everything. Whitaker allegedly instructed confidential informant Darnell Briggs to redirect suspicion in 1999 homicide. Details sealed under protective order. The system didn't just get it wrong, it chose to. The man they called a murderer was a cover story, a pawn in a larger game. Because the real killer wasn't on the streets anymore. He was inside the system same system that made arrests, buried evidence, moved files, and labeled a teenager a monster without proof. But exposing that system would mean bringing down more than one man. It would mean opening a door the state had been trying to seal shut for decades. The public defender knew the risk. The sister knew the danger. And Xavier? He was finally ready to fight, even if it cost him the only thing he had left. But just as they prepared to go public, to release the sealed documents, to drag Detective Whitaker's name into the light, something else happened. The public defender's office was ransacked overnight. No forced entry, no alarms. Just one thing missing, the file, and a note on the desk. Typed, unsigned. Stop digging, or you'll be next. The file was gone. The only copy that connected Darnell Briggs to Detective Whitaker, erased like it never existed. And in its place, a threat that felt more like a promise. Stop digging, or you'll be next. The public defender filed a report, but the police brushed it off as office mismanagement. No fingerprints, no security footage, no internal urgency. Like they wanted it to disappear. Like someone made a call before the sun came up. Xavier's sister didn't sleep that night. She sat at her kitchen table. Old case files spread like funeral programs. She'd watched her brother's life rot in a cell. She wasn't about to watch the truth get buried next. She remembered something. Not from a file, but from a voice. An old voicemail from years ago. From one of the jurors who'd tried to reach out after the trial. She said something felt wrong. That the prosecution moved too fast. That they were pressured to deliver a verdict. And she didn't want to carry the guilt anymore. She left a number. They found her. Older now. Living in a trailer outside Atlanta. Eyes haunted, voice trembling. She said she didn't sleep for weeks after the verdict. Said she was told not to ask questions. Said someone on the inside, court clerk maybe, told her quietly, "The kid's a scapegoat, but it's too late." She never told anyone. Not until now. Not until someone finally asked. And now, she had something else. She'd kept her jury packet, old court documents, and tucked in the back was a photocopy of the original witness statement. But it wasn't the version that was entered into evidence. It was longer, raw, different, and at the bottom, a name was scribbled out, but faintly visible beneath the redaction, W. Briggs. Not Darnell, but his brother, Wesley Briggs. A name not in any report. A name never questioned. A name who was there that night. They looked him up. And there he was. Still living in the same city. Still using the same last name. Still working security for the state attorney's office. The same office that fought every appeal, every motion, every attempt to clear Xavier's name. They had the wrong Briggs. Or maybe they had the right one the whole time, but kept it buried. Because if Wesley talked, if Wesley confessed, it wouldn't just expose the truth. It would detonate the system from the inside out. But just as they prepared to contact Wesley, he was already there, standing outside the public defender's apartment building in a gray hoodie, watching, not moving, not speaking, just watching, until he turned and walked away, leaving behind a folded piece of paper tucked under the windshield wiper. No words, just a time and a location, tomorrow, midnight. No cops. Come alone. He sat in the visiting room, the plastic chair digging into his old bones, his fingers curled around the edges of the table like they might disappear through it. The air smelled like stale coffee and cleaning chemicals, the same in every prison across the country. Xavier Miles, 44 years old but carrying a lifetime of 19, waited. Waited for a moment that should have come a quarter century ago. A moment when the system would finally see him, not as a number, not as a convicted murderer, but as a man who had been robbed. The letter had changed everything. I was the one who killed her. 4 simple words that exploded like a grenade inside the quiet cell of his mind. At first, Xavier thought it was a cruel joke, a trap, some twisted game played by guards or inmates who wanted to see him unravel. But then the new public defender showed up, a woman with tired eyes and fierce determination, who didn't just listen, she believed. She found cracks, tiny holes in the airtight case that was supposed to seal his fate forever. The police report missing pages, a witness who had never been called to testify, fingerprints on the belt, the actual murder weapon that were never tested, evidence that should have saved him. And now, after 25 years, they were reopening the case. But reopening a case meant opening wounds. Xavier had learned to survive by folding pain into silence, by shrinking inside his own skin. He had lost his 20s, his 30s. He had lost the boy who once dreamed of college and freedom. He was free now, at least on paper, but the question hung over him like a storm cloud. What kind of justice was this? The real killer was out there, somewhere, living a life that had nothing to do with prison walls or iron bars. And worse, he was free because the system wanted it that way. The man who had confessed, Darnell Briggs, wasn't the shadowy figure in a jail cell. He was a man with a name, a face, a family. A man who had spent years trying to bury a secret that weighed heavier than the bars themselves. When Xavier first met Darnell in that sterile visitation room, it was like meeting a ghost. Darnell was calm, almost too calm. His eyes told stories of fear, regret, and a life lived on the edge of silence. "They told me to," Darnell said. 4 words that shattered everything Xavier thought he knew about justice. They told me to. The confession was not just about a crime. It was about control, manipulation, a system so rotten it sacrificed the innocent to save itself. Darnell said the girl wasn't supposed to die. The murder wasn't planned. But once the wheels started turning, once the evidence was planted and the lies spread, it became impossible to stop. Detective Paul Whitaker's name came up more than once. His fingerprints on evidence that never saw the light. His voice behind threats. His shadow cast over every step of the investigation. Xavier's new lawyer dug deep, but just as they prepared to expose the truth, Darnell disappeared. One day, gone. No warning, no goodbye. Then came the news. A death ruled an overdose. But everyone who knew Darnell refused to believe it. 8 years clean. Regular churchgoer. A father trying to make right where wrong had been done. No drugs, no evidence of addiction. Just silence. And the silence was deafening. Xavier sat in his cell, clutching a letter Darnell had slipped him in their final meeting. An apology, a warning, a plea for justice. The system had buried Darnell just as it had tried to bury Xavier. But this time, Xavier was ready to fight. His sister, Tamara, never stopped believing. She kept every letter, every call, every fragment of hope that trickled through the cracks of their shattered lives. She was the fire to his cold ashes. Tamara had found something that made her blood run cold. An old police file marked internal use only. Detective Whitaker was under investigation years after Xavier was locked away. Bribery, evidence tampering, witness intimidation, and the investigation quietly closed. Buried like the truth it never found. A single line in the file stood out. Whitaker allegedly instructed confidential informant Darnell Briggs to redirect suspicion in 1999 homicide. Details sealed under protective order. The whispers in the courtroom, the hurried verdict, the unspoken fear, it all started to make sense. The system didn't make a mistake. It made a choice. Xavier was a scapegoat, a face to hide behind. The real killers walked free, and they did it with badges, guns, and lies. The public defender filed emergency hearings, demanding justice, demanding truth. But the system fought back. 3 weeks of silence, then threats. And then the public defender's office was ransacked. No signs of forced entry, no alarms triggered, just one thing missing: the file that connected Darnell to Whitaker. The only copy. Gone. Replaced by a typed note. Stop digging, or you'll be next. The warning was clear, but the fear wasn't just in the office. It was in the streets. Tamara sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the scattered files. She wasn't going to let her brother's name be erased again. Then came the call. An old juror wanted to speak. She'd never stopped feeling the weight of guilt. She said they were rushed, pressured, told not to ask questions. She handed over her jury packet. Inside was something no one expected: the original witness statement. Longer, raw, unedited, and at the bottom, a name faintly visible beneath a redaction: W. Briggs. Wesley Briggs. Not Darnell. His brother. Still alive. Still walking free. Still working security for the very office that fought every appeal to free Xavier. The office that buried the truth. They found Wesley waiting, outside the public defender's apartment, in a gray hoodie, watching. Not moving. Not speaking. Just watching. Then he left. But he left a folded piece of paper. No words. Just a time and a place. Tomorrow, midnight. No cops. Come alone. Midnight came. An empty parking lot. No cameras. No safety. Only the cold hum of street lamps and a heart beating too fast. The public defender waited, alone. Then Wesley appeared, tired, haunted. Carrying a burden too heavy for his shoulders, he confessed. It wasn't Darnell who pulled the belt tight. It was Wesley. And Whitaker? He was the puppeteer. The system was the stage. But just as Wesley began to reveal everything, a black car rolled into the lot. Windows tinted, engine low. A shadow slipped out, and the night got colder. The truth was close, but so was danger. And sometimes, when you dig too deep, the earth fights back. The black car waited, silent and menacing like a beast crouched in the dark. The street lamps flicker through long, wavering shadows across the cracked pavement. Wesley's breath came in shallow bursts, a fragile shield against the weight of years spent hiding in plain sight. The public defender stood rigid, heart hammering like a war drum, every instinct screaming to run. But running meant losing everything. A figure stepped from the car's shadow, face obscured beneath a hood, eyes sharp like broken glass. Wesley Briggs, the voice said, low and cold. Wesley didn't flinch. I told you everything, he said, voice rough, like gravel scraped over bone. The figure didn't move, just watched. You don't understand what you're doing. the figure said. But I do, Wesley whispered. He pulled a folded envelope from his pocket, hands trembling but determined. It's the last piece. The proof. The public defender's fingers brushed it. Inside, a photo. Detective Whitaker, Wesley Briggs, and a man no one had suspected. Someone inside the prosecutor's office, shaking hands, smiling. Corruption bleeding through every crack in the system. The figure took a step forward. Let this go. Forget everything. You don't want this. A warning. But Wesley's eyes burned with a storm that no threat could calm. This is bigger than me, he said. Bigger than you. Bigger than him. The figure's voice hardened, the night swallowing the words. You don't know who you're messing with. Suddenly, the street lamp flickered out. Darkness swallowed them all. A single shot cracked the silence. Wesley collapsed, blood blooming across his shirt like ink spilled on paper. The figure disappeared into the night as fast as it had come. The public defender dropped to her knees, clutching Wesley's body, the envelope slipping from his hand. A gust of wind scattered the papers across the empty lot. Sirens wailed in the distance. Too late, too slow. Wesley's eyes met hers, a final plea trapped behind the veil of pain. Finish it, he whispered. The truth was bleeding out on cold asphalt. But justice? Justice was still out there. Waiting. Waiting for someone brave enough to take the last step. And someone was watching. Hidden in the shadows beyond the flickering street lamps, waiting for the moment to strike again. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. The ambulance lights cut through the fog, red and blue bleeding into the damp night. The public defender sat frozen on the curb, hands stained with Wesley's blood, the weight of his last words crushing her chest. Finish it. But how? Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. She hesitated. Listen carefully, a voice whispered, cold and clipped. You're deeper in this than you think. They're watching everything, every move. Click. Gone. She glanced at the scattered papers, the envelope, the photo of Detective Whitaker shaking hands with a man in the prosecutor's office. The proof Wesley had risked his life to deliver. Her mind raced. Who was the man in the photo? Why had Wesley been targeted so ruthlessly? The courthouse felt less like a place of justice and more like a cage. The next morning, she arrived early, clutching the envelope tight. The halls whispered secrets, voices she couldn't quite hear but knew were there. Inside the prosecutor's office, she saw the man from the photo. Calm, composed, smiling like he owned the place. Her breath caught. She recognized him. Deputy District Attorney Marcus Hale, a man untouchable. She watched as he handed a file to Detective Whitaker. Their eyes met, cold, calculating. The walls closed in. She realized Wesley's confession wasn't just about clearing his name. It was about exposing a network of lies, deep inside the justice system itself. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. Meet me tonight. Warehouse 14. Alone. No signature. Fear gnawed at her, but so did determination. She had to know the truth, had to finish what Wesley started. As she left the office, a shadow moved behind her, quick, deliberate. She didn't look back. The web was tightening, and someone was ready to cut the last thread. Xavier Miles stepped out of the courthouse for the first time in 25 years. The sunlight felt foreign, harsh, and unforgiving, like a spotlight on a man who had lived in shadows too long. His legs, stiff and unfamiliar with freedom, carried him forward, but his mind was still trapped in that cell, still hearing the clanging of steel doors, the cold echo of solitary nights. Every breath outside was a reminder of everything lost, and everything that still waited for him. The media circled like vultures, hungry for a story about the innocent man freed too late. Cameras flashed, voices shouted questions he barely heard. His public defender stood beside him, a woman who had fought the system tooth and nail, who refused to accept too late as the end. She had unearthed the secrets, forced open the cracks in the foundation of his conviction. But she also knew this was just the beginning. Behind the scenes, the walls were closing in faster than ever. Detective Paul Whitaker had resigned quietly, disappearing from the public eye. But the shadow he cast stretched long. No charges, no apologies, only whispers and secrets that wouldn't die. The prosecutor's office was scrambling, trying to contain the fallout, protect themselves from the avalanche Xavier's exoneration had triggered. For Xavier, the fight was personal, not just for himself, but for the thousands who had been silenced, erased, forgotten. The ones still trapped behind bars, victims of a system that prized convenience over truth. His freedom was a victory, yes, but also a warning. That first night out, he didn't go to a fancy hotel or stay with distant relatives. He went straight to the small apartment his sister still kept, her fortress against a world that had never been kind to them. She met him at the door with tears in her eyes, holding a battered cardboard box filled with old photographs, letters, and keepsakes from a life that once was. She didn't say much. Words had failed them both too many times. Instead, they sat in silence, the box between them, memories pressing down like the weight of every lost moment. The photos were a testament to a childhood stolen, smiles frozen in time, birthdays celebrated without him, graduations he never attended, letters from friends who had faded away, scraps of hope torn apart by despair. A lifetime condensed into a few fragile pages. And then, buried deep inside the box, something new. A photocopy of a police file stamped "Internal Use Only." It wasn't part of the official record. It wasn't something the public defender had seen before. It was a secret waiting to be uncovered. His sister's hands trembled as she handed it over. This could change everything," she whispered. The file detailed years of investigation, years of cover-ups. The same detective who arrested Xavier, Paul Whitaker, had been under internal scrutiny long before the trial. Bribery, evidence tampering, witness intimidation. But none of it had ever made it to court. Instead, Whitaker was quietly transferred to a smaller precinct, away from the spotlight. One line jumped out at Xavier, burned into his mind. Whitaker allegedly instructed confidential informant Darnell Briggs to redirect suspicion in 1999 homicide. Details sealed under protective order. The pieces were falling into place. The confession letter from Darnell wasn't just a random act of guilt. It was a cry for help from someone caught in a web of lies and corruption. Someone who knew too much and paid the ultimate price for speaking out. Xavier's public defender was relentless. She pushed for a hearing to reopen the case, armed with this new evidence. But the DA's office stalled, threatening, ignoring. The same system that had locked him away now tried to bury him again. Then came the threats. The public defender's office was ransacked overnight. No forced entry, no alarms triggered. The only thing missing, the file that connected Darnell Briggs to Detective Whitaker. A typed note left behind. "Stop digging, or you'll be next." The message was clear. The silence, deafening. Xavier felt the chill of danger for the first time since he was taken. The fight to clear his name was no longer just about justice. It was about survival. His sister refused to back down. She dug deeper, pulling at threads others wanted left alone. An old voicemail surfaced, one from a juror who had never forgotten the trial. She said something felt off, that the prosecution pushed too hard, too fast, that she was warned not to ask questions. They tracked down the juror, a woman living alone in a trailer outside Atlanta, worn down by years of guilt and fear. Her voice trembled as she spoke, revealing details never made public. And then there was the witness statement. Not the polished, edited version entered into evidence, but the raw, unfiltered transcript. And at the bottom, a name crossed out, barely legible beneath the redaction. Wesley Briggs. Not Darnell. Wesley. Xavier's mind raced. Wesley Briggs, Darnell's brother, had never been questioned, had never been part of the official story. But he was there. That night, outside the party, waiting in the car. They found him, still living in the same city, still using the same name, working security for the state attorney's office, the very office that fought every appeal to free Xavier. The revelation was staggering. The wrong Briggs, or the one they were protecting all along. And just as the public defender prepared to contact Wesley, he was already there. Outside her apartment building, watching, silent, unmoving. Then turning away, leaving behind a folded piece of paper under the windshield wiper of her car. No words, just a time and a place. Tomorrow. Midnight. No cops. Come alone. The night air was thick with tension as the public defender approached the empty parking lot on the city's edge. Every shadow seemed to watch her, every distant sound amplified by the silence around her. Her heart pounded in her chest. Fear, anticipation, determination all tangled into one. She was alone. No backup. No security cameras. Just her voice recorder and a prayer on her lips. And then he appeared. Wesley Briggs. Not nervous. Not desperate. Just tired. Like a man who had carried a lifetime of secrets and was finally ready to unload them. He confessed everything. How he waited in the car while Darnell handled the confrontation. How things spiraled out of control. How the girl fought back. And in the struggle, Wesley pulled the belt tight. How Whitaker showed up before backup, telling them what to say, how to say it, who to blame. They were young, black, scared, and expendable. The cop offered a deal. One confession, one conviction, and clean records for the rest. Wesley said no. Darnell said yes. And the lie became law. They planted evidence, ignored fingerprints, sealed statements, because the system needed a scapegoat. And Xavier was the perfect one. The public defender recorded every word. She took the confession straight to court. And this time, they couldn't bury the truth. The judge's gavel slammed down like a thunderclap. Conviction vacated. 25 years wiped away in a moment. But the damage? That didn't disappear. Xavier walked out older, quieter, still broken. His mother had died inside. His friends had moved on. The world had sped past him, but he was free. And when the cameras asked what he wanted to say, he looked straight into the lens. His voice calm but hollow. You can't give me back time. But maybe you can stop stealing it from someone else. But freedom came with a price. Wesley Briggs was arrested, charged, tried, and sentenced. Detective Whitaker resigned quietly. No charges, no apology, just a pension. The system protected itself. But the story didn't end. It went viral, sparked protests, made people ask questions. For once, the questions were loud enough. Not just for Xavier, but for those still waiting, still silenced, still buried. Because sometimes justice isn't blind. It's just late. But it's still worth fighting for. Then the call came, late at night, from a number Xavier didn't recognize. A voice, cold, threatening. You think this ends with Wesley? You're wrong. There's someone else, someone higher up, and they're coming for you next. The line went dead. Xavier's heart raced. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. The phone call haunted Xavier Miles long after it ended. Someone higher up, someone more dangerous than Wesley Briggs or Detective Whitaker. A shadow lurking above the mess of lies, corruption, and injustice that had stolen a quarter-century of his life. He wasn't naive. Freedom didn't erase the scars. It didn't undo the years lost in a cage. And now, it seemed, it might not even guarantee his safety. But Xavier had learned one thing in prison. Fear was a luxury he couldn't afford. He sat in his small apartment, the only place he could call home for now. The walls were bare. No photos, no trophies. Just a chair, a table, and a window looking out onto a city that had changed without him. His phone buzzed. A message from his public defender. I found something. Meet me tomorrow. We need to talk. It's bigger than we thought. The truth, it seemed, was still unfolding. The next day, they met in a quiet cafe. His public defender slid a thick envelope across the table. Inside, new documents, emails, memos, financial records, names, dates, payments. A web of corruption that stretched far beyond one detective or one crooked prosecutor. Political donations funneled through shell companies. Judges pressured to look the other way. Witnesses bribed, intimidated, silenced. And at the center, a powerful state senator, James Caldwell. A man with influence over law enforcement, the judiciary, and politics. A man whose name Xavier had never dared to speak aloud, until now. The senator's fingerprints were all over the case. He had the motive, to cover up scandals involving his own family's business ties to the criminal underworld, to maintain power at any cost. And Xavier? The perfect scapegoat. Xavier's fight had just become bigger than personal justice. It was about exposing a system rigged to protect the powerful while destroying the powerless. They took the evidence to a federal prosecutor's office. For the first time, there was genuine interest. An investigation launched. Grand juries convened. Subpoenas served. But with every step forward, threats escalated. Car tires slashed. Anonymous letters. Whispers in the dark. Xavier felt the old fear creeping in. but it no longer controlled him. Then came the day of reckoning. The senator's office raided by federal agents, the media frenzy, the public outcry. Senator Caldwell arrested on charges of racketeering, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit wrongful imprisonment. Justice was slow, painfully slow, but it was finally moving. Xavier watched the trial unfold on TV, the same courtroom where he was once convicted, now filled with faces who had supported him, who demanded accountability. He sat quietly in the gallery, no longer the accused, but the survivor. When the verdict came, a guilty verdict on all counts, Xavier allowed himself to breathe deeply for the first time in decades. But freedom wasn't just about one man's victory. It was about all the others who were still inside cells for crimes they didn't commit. Xavier dedicated himself to advocacy, to speaking out, to fighting wrongful convictions and police misconduct. His story became a beacon of hope and a call to action. Because if one man could be freed after 25 years, how many others were waiting for their chance? This story is a reminder. Justice delayed is not justice denied, but it comes at a price. And that price is paid in years stolen, families broken, and lives forever changed. Now, we want to hear from you. What do you think needs to change in the justice system to prevent stories like Xavier's from happening again? How can communities support those who have been wrongfully convicted? What role should law enforcement and prosecutors play in ensuring accountability? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's start a conversation that matters. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more real stories of courage, injustice, and hope. Your voice helps raise awareness. Together, we can demand a justice system that truly serves everyone. Thank you for joining us on Xavier's journey. And remember, every story matters. Every voice counts.